thank you for coming tonight to 14 George. I'm happy we were able to pull a few people away from the mayor's inauguration. So thank you very much for being here. And I'm also extremely happy to introduce Maura Hogan. Maura has been a critic for the Post and Courier and has reviewed Spoleto performances for how long?
Oh, well, I mean, I did it before then, too, for another publication.
Oh, right.
So
okay.
I'm going on probably about 8 years.
8 years. Fabulous. Great.
Serving as an overview critic as well for both publications.
Well, I'm deeply grateful to have this conversation tonight, and especially excited to do it with Maura as co-pilot. We've done this. This is now our third iteration of us doing this, and I'm so excited to talk to you about the 2024 festival. There's a lot to dig into, and you know, I think in this conversation, we want to give you a little bit of the behind-the-scenes peek, sort of give you an understanding of how we come to this point and what brought us here. So Maura, over to you.
All right. Thank you so much, Mena. And I got my ticket brochure and I flipped through it, and there's a lot to discuss, a lot of exciting things. One thing we briefly talked about a minute ago was whether or not you considered this really your first all-Mena festival, and your response was?
I don't want to say all Mena, because there are a lot of people that have a hand in this festival and in prior festivals. I would say 2023 last year was probably the first festival that really was about like 95% the new team. Mm-hmm. And 2022 was like a good 50-50, you know, or maybe a good 60-40. There were quite a few holdovers from 2020, the pandemic, cancellations and things like that, that we saw in 2022 and even seeped into 2023. Mm-hmm. You know, the biggest example of that is that The Crucible by the Scottish Ballet was initially a tour that was planned for 2020, and then they moved that tour for 2023. Mm-hmm. But this one, yeah, I mean, I think we have a spectacular team of artists here and people who like to sort of construct things and think about how you put the festival, how to conceive it, what the through lines are, what the framework is. And you know, that is done collaboratively with myself and with our lead producer, Liz Keller-Tripp, and also with the people who run different sort of series. Our chamber music series now being run by Paul Bianco, our orchestral series being run by Tim Myers, our choral series being run by Joe Miller, and our jazz series being run by Larry Blumenfeld.
Okay, wonderful. And I did, and you're starting to respond to that, but I did want to talk about sort of your overarching approach to how you cobble together a festival of this nature. Do you have any sort of mandate in your head of what you're trying to achieve from one year to the next?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are different approaches to putting something as intensely interdisciplinary as this is. You know, I think the first thing we should say is that Spoleto is unique in that it is probably the country's, at this level, sole interdisciplinary producing performing arts festival. So we produce and create and commission in music, in theater, in dance, etc. And we can also do it interstitially between the different art forms. I knew Nigel before I had this position, you know, and collaborated with him at the Lincoln Center Festival, and also met with him before that collaboration when Houston Grand Opera brought up Weinberg's opera, The Passenger, in 2014 to the Lincoln Center Festival at the Park Avenue Armory. And Nigel described the festival as a boa constrictor that swallows an elephant. You know, and I think there is a truth to that, in that the intensity of the festival, when the endorphins kick in, for example, are really through this 17-day period. You can sort of expand that into a 6-week period when we're in our rehearsal period, or a 7 to 8 week period when we're doing cleanup and things like that. But Nigel was very adamant, I think, in his perspective, that the festival should be this kind of catalytic collision of different things. And I find a deep appreciation for that approach. I think that approach has a spectacular vibrancy and dynamism to it. But my approach is different. So I try to look at some primary pieces, these kind of tent poles in the festival, and then curate out from that.
Okay.
And so what happens is you have these through lines that kind of create a curatorial cohesiveness in the festival. And
do they change from one year to the next? Is there something that, would you look at diaspora one year, for example, or not?
yeah, I don't think we're ever going to be as pedantic as saying the theme of the festival this year is crime and punishment, and then just like, hit people over the head with it. I think we would have a lot of topicality, a lot of response to what is happening in the cultural moment, the social moment, the political moment, because I don't think the arts, the performing arts, is not a vacuum. It's a way people can live and breathe and respond to the world around them. And so you will see a through line of certain things in this festival that you did not see in the last festival. This is a festival that really has to do with some of the more difficult and distressing challenges that we're seeing in our society. Some of the migration challenges that we have, especially in a piece like Ruinous Gods, but also in our, which is a world premiere opera that we're presenting this year, but also in our world premiere play, Song of Rome, and also in our North American premiere play, Dark Moon. You see in this festival as well a sort of examination or an investigation of mythologies, be that in the classics from Virgil's Aeneid to the kinds of folklores and mythologies that are interpreted through Persephone and Demeter in Ruinous Gods, Persephone or Demeter in Ruinous Gods, depending on your pronunciation, and also examining kind of the mythologies that found nations and countries, like that of Dark Noon, and some of the stories that we tell ourselves about some of the foundational folklores and fables of this country as well. So I think you can look at all of that and say this is also a festival about examining, what stories we tell ourselves and how we tell them and who's telling them.
Right, because some of the main sort of almost marquee events of this year's festival are retold stories. I mean, as you just mentioned, so Ruinous Gods is the Persephone and Demeter story. Romeo and Juliet is, a story everyone knows. And then the O'Hare piece is the Aeneid, correct?
Yeah,
so
the Aeneid,
yeah, so, and I have found, Mena and I were talking a little earlier, that I can't help it in my role as overview critic. I always do try to find those through lines, but try to do it in a way that's not too ham-fisted, because you want to let the artist and the art breathe. You don't want to put too much on it from what you're seeing, just so that you can say something clever in the Post and Courier, or that you can tie something into a neat bow in an international arts festival. But it is incredible how these things emerge every year. One year, pre-Me Too movement, it was the woman. It was the year of the woman. Every show, it wasn't necessarily billed that way, had to do with female empowerment. Many of the productions actually had stilettos as a main prop for it. And nobody was in cahoots. These were coming from all over the world.
There's a real missed marketing opportunity, Spoleto and stilettos.
Right, exactly. Maybe it was subliminal, right.
I do have to say, though, that you know, this is a difficult time to be alive. I don't know how many people read David Brooks's op-ed in the New York Times where he talks about these are brutalizing times to be alive. And obviously he's talking about the war in Ukraine, the war in Israel and Gaza. But it's, I think that we have to look at the performing arts as a moment to just kind of find some connective human tissue. Be that in a string quartet, be that in a cabaret, be that in a performance of a play. There's something about the perfection of technique matched with the performing arts' incalculable ability to immediately give an emotive response, plus the fact that you can have two people in an audience that look at one object in two completely different ways. That should be a metaphor of how we want to live our lives. That should be a metaphor of what kind of society we want to inhabit. And I think that is something that is really an important nugget of this festival. And it's also part and parcel to who I am and my background and my education and my training.
And that is, you know, that's more and more I'm reading about the thinking that individuals are having such a difficult time having conversations if they're polarized in any way, political or elsewise, but more and more people are finding that the arts serve as a way that people can engage in conversation by responding to the art instead of having tough conversations one-on-one. So the festival, in all of that multiplicity, is, I would think, a unique opportunity to have those conversations all over Charleston and well beyond.
Yeah, and I think it's partly because what we do at Spoleto, even if you have a performance that is really using technology in a spectacular way, like our performance of Romeo and Juliet, the ballet by Prokofiev, that's being done in collaboration with LA Dance Project. Even if it's really technologically engaged, the format is deeply analog. It is not this. You know, and that's what we're all doing. We go to sleep with these things. When we wake up in the morning, we look at these things. They zap our brains, they burn our brains, but like, let's try to get money from Apple, so I'll put it down. So all of these things, I think, are really important to find that kind of analog connectivity. The fact that we can see some physical expression that takes us away from the echo chamber of digital media and the internet. And I do think that the performing arts is an antidote to that echo chamber. And I think that is something that is going to be a key foundational pillar for every festival, I think, moving forward. Okay. Because we need to push back against that. And the way you push back is through these communal, congregational, analog activities, like, you know, going to chamber music or seeing a new play or seeing some spectacular physical performance like Apricity.
Okay, all right. Well, let's talk a little bit about the coming festival. One question I had for you was, is there a particular production or two that you really feel is emblematic of what you're trying to achieve, and that is exactly the message that you'd like Spoleto to be communicating with its audiences?
Yeah, I think, you know, it's easy to highlight probably three specific offerings this year. The world premiere opera, Ruinous Gods.
Tell us a little more about that and how it came to be, and how it's shaping up.
So this is the first opera by Layal Shakar. She is a spectacular violinist of Lebanese extraction who grew up in France and then moved her career over to the United States. She is a violinist that can perform her instrument in all of these different sort of languages. And that's one of the things that excites me about music, is this fluidity to kind of go from different worlds using an instrument that you may not think comes from that world. So it's a violin. That's a Western instrument. That's an instrument that is famous for Vivaldi concertos, etc. But she uses it to sort of play Arabic maqam, and she uses it to play jazz and to perform in this kind of very mutable sort of kind of shifting manner. It's almost like shape-shifting in music. And she's comfortable in all of these different worlds and in all of these different vocabularies and musical languages. And she brings that to her first opera, which is an opera that is, as we discussed, based on the myth of Persephone, but really is about the tragedy of a young migrant girl who is stuck in a kind of refugee cycle, who cannot find her way home. And it's told through this kind of folklore or metaphor that you see animals kind of speaking to her, creating this kind of almost childlike world of imagination, which allows you to get through this very difficult story. And that's even based in the tragedy of what happens psychologically to children that are in refugee crises, which is they have something called resignation syndrome, a medical state that is catatonic and somewhat comatose, where they basically are non-responsive. And this happens to children in refugee camps. This happens to children that are struggling with migration. So she was, as someone who was at the time pregnant and has now since become a young mother, she was quite taken with this medical phenomenon. And decided to write this opera with the help of Lisa Schlesinger, who is a spectacular playwright and also quite well known as a playwright through the Iowa Writers Workshop, where a lot of young writers hone their skills. And Lisa and Leal have created this work that you're almost not sure of what universe it exists in, compositionally, musically, and theatrically. And the production by Maya and Omar is really sort of built up. It's very physical. And you see a kind of a sense of loss, but also sometimes humor, sardonic wit, kind of a strange, perverse sense of excitement. And this is the whole confluence of emotions that I think happens in such a state. There's a movement in the opera that's kind of in this weird martial romp. It's like a kind of sort of military sort of march. And it's Jeb Bezos is flying to the moon. And they're all kind of singing it in this weird sort of martial way. It's actually quite funny. And they obviously don't say Jeff Bezos because, we're, I mean, how many lawyers do we have in the room? So, but I think with artistic license, Jeff Bezos, it's even funnier that it's done that way. So I think there is a lot of topicality there. There is a sense that it is rooted in this time and place, but also timeless. And the fact that you have this world that combines all of these different things, I think, like Omar, premiered in 2022, this is going to be a piece that really captures the zeitgeist. And it's something that we should be very proud of at the festival.
And so what can we expect production-wise, like production values? Are we talking about sweeping sets? Is it more spare?
It is more spare.
Okay.
And it is quite analog. So
Okay.
you're not going to see like big projections and screens and there may be some of that, some of that's still to come. But what we have seen is this kind of spare buildup that uses like rocks and fixtures in ways that are again quite mutable and transformational.
Okay. All right. Okay, so that's one very compelling example of what is emblematic of the festival, and yet you said you had a couple more.
Oh yeah, I have three Two more. I have one more. No, just kidding. I think that Dennis O'Hare and Lisa Peterson's new play, Song of Rome, is pretty exciting.
Yeah.
How many people here saw an Iliad last year with Dennis O'Hare? That was, about an hour and 45 minutes of, I think, one of the most striking performances on stage. And what's remarkable about what Dennis accomplished, and this is outside of the acting, this is really about the directing and about the script, is, again, how to take this age-old story of Homer, an Iliad. It's potentially a cornerstone of our intellectual heritage, the oldest story of oration that has been written down. How to take this story and make it so modern and so current and so topical. There were moments, he shifted things in different performances, but there were always moments in that performance of an Iliad where he referenced South Carolina, he referenced the people in South Carolina who have sacrificed themselves in war, in conflict, referenced the Civil War, and referenced, up until that point, the war in Ukraine. Because an Iliad was a kind of Jeremiad on why the lunacy of war and the lunacy of conflict. So in that same kind of universe, that same sort of cinematic universe or theatrical universe, you have this new play, Song of Rome, that is being co-written by Dennis and Lisa. They also co-wrote an Iliad. And it's a world premiere, and it is a retelling of Virgil's Aeneid. And the Aeneid is not just a work that grapples with the foundational myth of Rome. It is about Rome kind of being connected to ancient Troy, which is why it's still part of the same kind of universe of an Iliad. But it's also a work that is about the dissolution of the Roman Republic and the rise of the Roman autocracy, the rise of the emperor, the rise of the Caesar. This is all happening. It was written, it was actually, I think, commissioned by Augustus. And it was written as a sort of praise piece to Augustus, who was obviously, a Roman emperor. But this was in the period of when the Republic was in its last gasps. It was after the death of Julius Caesar, after the assassination of Julius Caesar. The Republic was in its last gasps. The Senate, which was a corrupt body, was kind of falling apart. And there was a significant amount of civil war in the Roman Empire, which led to, in the Roman Republic, which then led to the foundation of the Roman Empire. This is all told through a pre-med student who doesn't care about the classics, but has to take a class in the classics to satisfy her intellectual heritage course, who then hires a tutor to try to help her understand the Aeneid. And that tutor is an immigrant from Albania. And what happens is that the medical student or the pre-med student and the tutor, woman and man, end up sort of shifting from modern times into ancient times. So the woman becomes Octavia and the man becomes Virgil. So you see this kind of, again, timelessness, this sense that you're playing with time and space. There was a fabulous review of Spoleto in 2022 that Joshua Barone wrote in the New York Times when he was talking about Unholy Wars, Omar, and La Boheme, where being in Charleston during Spoleto, but specifically something about Charleston, gives it this timeless quality. You're sitting outside and you're walking past a beautiful home from the 18th, 19th century, and you see a Tesla parked there. And then you go to a performance which deals with, Omar being sold into bondage in 1807, or Unholy Wars, which is dealing with the Crusades, but in this kind of weird, sort of timeless manner that is in a different universe, but still somewhat topical to what is happening today. And that sense, that's what we're looking for in the arts.
Yeah.
And that's what matches Charleston so effectively. and it's what we can sort of export to different cities, and what makes this festival and makes Charleston a real engine of creativity and new work. You know, these are both world premieres. Ruinous Gods has 2 European companies signed on, one in Germany, one in the Netherlands, as co-producers and co-commissioners. We are looking at, you know, this being, these pieces and these works really being new works that enter, hopefully, regular performance.
Mm-hmm. And it does also point out another thing that we're seeing happen with your festival, and as you continue and as
Our
you,
festival.
yeah, with y'all's festival.
Y'all.
Is, or, you know, I'll just say this new chapter of the festival.
Okay.
Is a new scaffolding being built. So O'Hare came, you know, that, and Lisa Peterson, that was a very successful show. So now they are coming back.
That's right.
And so do you anticipate that kind of cross-pollination from one year to another with different artists? Jamez McCorkle came back, and after Omar the next year. Is that something that we can look forward to building this community of artists, not necessarily excluded to that you have to be in the festival to be in the festival, but that there are these through lines artistically as well?
Yeah, I think, you know, we are really engaged with a certain type of artist that is extremely inquisitive about the world around them, and is trying to use the collection of stories, of human material, of collective experiences to try as much as possible to create transformational experiences for our audience. And I think it's, you know, you do sort of start to have people that we as an audience and that we as a festival almost kind of fall in love with. I mean, you know, Anthony Roth Costanza is another one. He's, you know, someone that we've had at the festival and that came last year and did Only an Octave Apart. We obviously, Dennis O'Hare is someone who you see sort of at the festival again, and he's a new artist that we've brought on that hasn't been at the festival before. And, you know, Kareem Suleiman was a new artist who's a Grammy Award winner from, I think, 2019, and I think won a second Grammy in the last, he won a second Grammy last year. So you start to see, and he's coming back this year to perform in Ruinous Gods and also perform in The Creation.
Oh, great.
So, and he's a singer. So you start to see this kind of, it's almost like a leitmotif, you know, it's something that is recurring and that sort of changes in different iterations, and then you develop these kinds of relationships with these individuals. And I mean, the cool thing about that, the exciting thing about that is that you then start to earn trust. It's like any relationship. When you work with someone more, you start to build up trust. And when you build up that kind of trust, you could start doing more exciting, inventive, cool things together. And that's how you start creating these new works together. I mean, you know, truth be told, Leal and I, we go back like 10 years.
Yeah.
I met her in like 2013, 2014. We both worked with Daniel Barenboim. And so that trust was there, you know, when we came together to say, let's premiere this opera. That trust has been built with Dennis and Lisa through our work with them last year in an Iliad. The third piece I did not mention, but I think, you know, warrants a mention, is perhaps one of the grittiest, likely most controversial things that this new chapter of the festival has produced, which is Dark Noon, a play that is a retelling of the foundation of this country through a South African theater troupe. Are y'all into Cormac McCarthy? Have people like read and loved Cormac McCarthy? So like, if you've read Blood Meridian, which is about as like bloody and realistic sort of a Western as you could imagine.
That was my beach read one summer, and I thought, what have I?
Yeah, I'm like that. I tend to
Yeah.
like, fall backwards into like the most aggressive beach reading possible. But I love Cormac McCarthy. Another kind of, I think, funnier reference point, or perhaps more accessible reference point, is even something like Breaking Bad or like an HBO serial. This play is violent. It is gritty. It comes with parental warnings. I would not take Hugo, my almost 4-year-old, or Banvar, my almost 2-year-old, or even our 6-year-old dog to this play. So I think I can't forget Aggie. She's a big part of our family. But I think this play is extremely important. It's incredibly compelling. It truly embraces the magic of theater. You see a whole world created in front of you. It's quite magical. Over the course of the play, it starts as a pile of dirt, and it's literally built up in front of you, and it's interactive. If you're one of the lucky few that's on one of the low benches around the U that forms the production, you are part of the play. You are involved in the play, but it is controversial. Yeah, it is controversial. It is definitely intense, and I think we're going to have to do a lot of public education around it. There are black characters and whiteface in the play. Yeah, I know. And it is a North American premiere. So this is, again, it's something that I think is important to what Spoleto is and what it has been and what it maintains to be, which is a place where new work is created and where we really go for some of the cutting edge work, even if it is sort of at that cutting edge, potentially savage. Yeah. So this is a North American premiere coming here, and then after its performance or its series here, it goes to St. Anne's Warehouse in New York. Oh, wow. So very proud to have it here. I think it's going to sell really well, but it's for a specific audience member, and I think it's important that is said.
Right. And at the same time, you have legacy artists that are a big part of the program too, such as Yo-Yo Ma, who has been at this festival almost since its inception.
That's right. Yeah. He was here in 1978, in 1979, in 1982, and in 1986. So
it was the second festival, was 78, I guess.
Second festival. He was here since the second festival.
Yeah.
So very excited to have Yo-Yo back again. I've known him from my work in Berlin. Liz, our lead producer, knows him because she was the producer of Silk Road, the ensemble that Yo-Yo led for many years and has since handed over to Rhiannon Giddens. So to have Yo-Yo back, it's so exciting. I mean, really, like, such a compelling, one-of-a-kind artist that really is a leader, a thought leader, and an artistic leader that is generational. Really, you can't undersell that.
Right. And it does give you that through line, not just throughout this year's festival, but throughout the trajectory of the festival, to have what he has been up to. And he has a specific project, right, that was sort of came from the pandemic.
Yeah, so these are reflections on his cello suites project. That was a many years project where he toured the world playing the Bach cello suites. And now he's come out on the other side. This is kind of something that's never been done before. It's a unique project. You won't see it anywhere else. It's Yo-Yo performing parts of the cello suites and speaking about them and how they have informed his life and travel, and also how his interpretation has been formed by his interpretation of the cello suites has been formed by his life and travels. So it's part performance, part lecture, and it's a one-of-a-kind. You're not going to see it anywhere else. Unless, it's done here and it's perfected here, and then they take it on the road. But you'll see it here first, let me put it that way.
Okay. I did want to talk about, we talked about some of the through lines, such as these stories retold and legacy and new scaffolding. Another is the masculine and the feminine. I think there's a lot of gender fluidity in this year's festival, and I wondered if you could speak a little bit to that.
Sure. I mean, I have personally been obsessed with the artist Sasha Velour since I saw her perform on season 9 of RuPaul's Drag Race. Her reveal at the finale of RuPaul's Drag Race I think is the apotheosis of that show. And to have Sasha, whose work centers around the reveal, which in and of itself is a very theatrical concept. There is ambiguity, and then there is a reveal to show, either the true gender or something that is a hidden message beneath the play on gender that happens in drag. And I think that's, Sasha has taken, Sasha's not the only drag artist to do this, but I think Sasha has been part of this new generation that creates drag truly as an art form. And I mean, to have her here, actually after her book was published, The Big Reveal, is very exciting and, super, just personally stoked to see her here. There's also some gender play in Romeo and Juliet. So this is a ballet by Sergei Prokofiev, and it's with LA Dance Project, which is the dance company that is run by Benjamin Millepied, who's a famous ballet choreographer. I think best known for choreographing and directing, I believe, Black Swan, by the film starring Natalie Portman from a decade plus ago. And this is very cool because I think it is not so common anymore that you actually see ballet with live orchestral performance. So we are actually, the festival orchestra is performing the entire Prokofiev Romeo and Juliet ballet, and it is being choreographed and danced to by LA Dance Project. And it's a really cool production that has live capture, and you see things projected on stage while the dances are on stage that are happening backstage or happening through different parts of the Gilliard. It's a really sort of spectacular usage of the facility and the space. And some nights you may see Romeo and Juliet as two men, as two women, as a man and a woman. So there's a lot of gender fluidity there as well.
And then there's also cassette roulette. So that,
Also, yes, of course, John Cameron Mitchell, which you may know from Hedwig and the Angry Inch. So, he is coming and performing cassette roulette, and that is over 3 performances. Again, you probably are not going to see 2 performances that are alike during that run. And, he does normally do some music from Hedwig in it. So, very excited to have him here.
Very fun. And I did really, back to the scaffolding, I wanted to talk a little bit about that, about Spoleto's team right now, because there are some major players on the artistic team and how that is coming together. And that's actually informed by that scaffolding as well, because Paul Wanko has been a major part of the chamber music series, and it was a delight. I wrote about that in the paper, that he is now taking that baton after Jeff. And Tim Myers had already been at Spoleto last year for Vanessa. So if you want to talk a little bit about, is your team in place artistically and administratively? It's a big shift when after a tenure of as many years as your predecessor did.
Yeah, I mean, Nigel and that team had been around or Nigel himself had been around for nearly 3 decades.
Yeah.
And, first, it has to be stated that what Nigel has accomplished at the festival is really, first of all, it's spectacularly world class.
Yeah.
It is this interdisciplinary gem that allows, interaction between different art forms and the creation of new works, partly because he is so adventurous as a curator. And I still say he is, because sometimes I talk to him about some projects and he definitely has a thought or two about different things here or there, and I think it's just pretty, it's kind of a dream job to follow in the footsteps of Nigel, someone who has really pushed the envelope and been such a successful avant-gardist, doing Peony Pavilion, doing, Das Mädchen by Helmut Lachenmann, The Little Matchstick Girl, Tree of Life Quartet, all of these works that I think have really made Spoleto a kind of center for creativity and ingenuity. And I think that's true of our artistic team. That spirit, that intrepid spirit that makes this such a unique festival and such a unique venture still lives on in this team. And, you know, we still have Larry, we still have Joe, we have continuity that is holding, you know, from Nigel's days into this new chapter. And there's also staff continuity as well, you know. But, you know, at the senior management level of staff and obviously at some artistic director level, there are significant changes. And I think that, you know, having Paul and Tim in place really creates a new day of collaboration and cross-pollination between these different art forms.
Okay.
So you're going to see the orchestra not just in the ballet, not just in the opera, not just headlining its own orchestral performances, but also performing with Aoife O'Donovan. You know, you're going to see Inan Barnaton, who we all know and love in our chamber music series, performing Shostakovich's first piano concerto in the orchestra. You're going to see Rina Ismail, who is our composer in residence for the chamber music series, see her works see her works at chamber music, orchestral, and choral performances. So there is all of this cross-pollination because we've created a kind of system where these artistic directors are working off of each other.
Right.
And I think that's
like an ecosystem,
it's an ecosystem
in a way that I think will make going to multiple productions, you know, all the more meaningful.
Correct.
When you get to see people and artists in different contexts and really that world being built. Now, have we left anything out that there's so much more? You know, we've touched upon chamber music. We've got all of the wonderful. We didn't really get that much into the global versus the local because there is both. There's a lot of wonderful.
Pedrito Martinez and Quentin Baxter, and I mean,
right, and the Low Country Gola program. Anything else that you want these fine folks to be able to leave here and as they're looking and figuring out their Spoleto for this year?
I think, first of all, I'm excited about this 2024 festival. I think it's got so much upside. I think that it's going to be so exciting again to feel the world converge onto the streets of Charleston and feel this life and excitement in the air as you go from performance to performance and just all the different people and artists here. It's just such a unique thing to be at the helm of, and I'm deeply grateful and gracious for that opportunity. But I do think I have to. I've been instructed that I should be taking questions from the audience and potentially from the live stream as well. So I don't want to drone on and on. So are there questions?
Can you talk a little bit about the system and the programs that have?
Of course. Thank you, Lee. So the question was, can we talk about the Cistern and some of the programming in the Cistern? The Cistern this year, first of all, we've expanded the Cistern programming.
Okay.
You're going to see right now about 8 performances in the Cistern, and actually 2 two-night sets. So we open the festival with Old Crow Medicine Show, and we close the festival with Jason Isbell. These are shows that are really about music as the most open and accessible manner I still think music is the most immediate of the performing arts. Like, you know, I'll put my hand up and say I have my biases. It probably goes back to being a pianist and a boy soprano. But I certainly think that there's something so immediate and special about seeing a performance in the Cistern. It's unlike anything, you know. You could compare it to Red Rocks in Colorado. You could compare it to some of these really specific spaces, the Verbier Festival in Switzerland, where you have this gorgeous setting and you have like absolutely transcendent musical performances. And you'll have that night after night after night in the Cistern, both with performers who have been at the festival and have experienced great success here, like Old Crow Medicine Show, and with performers that are local, like Amos Lee, and have had spectacular national and international success and have not had a performance at Spoleto, and with superstars like Jason Isbell, who's now, I think, legitimately moved into acting as a field as well, since he was he starred in Killers of the Flower Moon. And you will see them in a setting and sometimes doing things that are entirely unique. So Jason is performing 2 nights, the 8th and the 9th, to close the festival at the Cistern, and is performing largely alone. There may be 1 or 2 musicians backing him in a largely acoustic setting. He's not with his band 400 Units. Normally when Jason performs with that band, he's selling out a 10,000, 15,000 seat stadium. Here you have the chance to be one of 2,000 people. I know that sounds like a big number, but it's far more intimate, listening to him craft and work in an entirely unique manner. I think it's also important to understand how much these artists are grappling with some of the biggest questions of our day. Aoife O'Donovan she's created this project. She's in the Satilia. She's not part of the Cistern, but is still part of the same universe. She's this folk and Americana artist that has created work around the 100th anniversary of the 19th Amendment. So it's all about the woman in modern American society, and she's done that in such a sensitive and spectacular way. The album's going to come out in March, so it's again an opportunity to hear these artists in a unique setting that is not really replicable. So very excited about the Cistern, and excited about how this could be a proof of concept for the festival. The important thing to me is that the festival has to be a bigger tent. It has to be engaging with more people. It has to be engaging with wider audiences. It has to be bringing people in. And I think this year, this is probably the first year where I feel really confident in saying this, that with the festival in 2024 in the Cistern, at least under my tenure, this is the biggest tent we've ever had.
Well, I think that sounds like the perfect culmination of a very enriching session, learning so much more, and I can't wait to dig even deeper before I start blazing a trail through this year's festival. And thanks for all of those insights.
Thank you, Maura.
And onward we go, I think, right?
Onwards and upwards. Thank you.